Hello, good morning. Alrighty, Roo. Let's see here. Don't need that. Don't need that. Okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's not bad. How's everybody feeling? Okay? Yeah? Day 3? Not burnt out yet? Good morning, Jim. Sophie, I'm really glad that you color your hair because I'm always like curious. Like every morning before you walk in, I'm like, I wonder if her hair is gonna be a different color today, and it's always kind of fun. So thank you. Maybe I could try that. Do you think? Think it would work?
Probably.
I don't think it's long enough for the two-tone. I think I can only do one color, but
You can color your beard instead.
I was
Would that be a statement?
that would be a statement. I was saying I could color my hair because, you know, at least if I don't like it, it'll be gone in 10 days, but okay. Here we go. Ready, people? All right. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to a slightly rainy day in Vancouver, which sometimes it is that way, but that's okay. What do you think? Do you guys like the rain? Not so much?
Yes.
Yeah? Mark, what do you think?
I like rain.
Don't like it?
Yeah.
No?
Too messy.
Too messy? Daniel? Rain? Good? It's all right? I don't mind it either. I come from a much snowier place, so I much prefer the rain to the snow. But it snows here sometimes too. Okay, so Ben is here. Good morning. Good morning to you, Ben. Tifchin Sana is here. Good morning to you. And Unati is here. Good morning. Okay, let's jump in. So, yesterday we were talking about what history actually was, and rather than being a collection of kind of random dates and people and battles and things like that, I was trying to say that it's a narrative, it's a story, and we use that story to kind of understand the past and to kind of identify which events are significant, which people are significant, how we've come to live in the world of today, and and why we should kind of pay attention to the sort of patterns of cause and consequence, or cause and effect in history. Because I didn't ask you this yesterday, but maybe I'll ask you now. There is this kind of idea that history repeats itself, is there not? Have you heard that before? Is that true? Or is that just a thing people say? Do you think history does repeat in a way? Yeah? Why do you say that?
Because it happens years, like many thousand years, and there must be some complicated event in the stuff, and like just think about like World War I and World War II. It's like the whole World War happened twice.
Yeah.
And then like the effect of World War I is like massive, and then like have a lot of damage, a lot of that, but like it still happened at World War II.
Yeah.
World War II still happens, so yeah.
Do you think we'll ever have a, the idea that World War I was a global conflict is kind of, it wasn't entirely global, but do you think we'll ever have a sort of full-scale conflict like World War I or World War II again? It's possible. Anything's possible, but do you think it's likely? I mean, it's been almost 80 years. Andre, what do you think? Yeah, why? Look at the world. Okay. Yeah, but tell me what?
So many things that happen that it's not only the poison side, it's also the poison side. Only that most of the things that happen now, like the opposite side are weaker, way weaker. And like in some way they have to kill them.
Like who are the sides in your mind?
So, I mean, that so many things happen. I mean, for example, I'm not saying it could. Yeah, I'm not saying it could, but it's just an example, like what happened to Israel. Yeah, the killing Muslims.
Yeah.
Just because they want the east side of Israel to look like the west side of Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah, only for that. So I think there was like really a conflict. Yeah, really possible.
Yeah, we have a conflict in, a very active conflict in Israel and Palestine right now, right? We have a very active conflict in Ethiopia right now, right? We have, what's that? In China right now, we have conflicts there between China and Hong Kong and other places. Yeah, there are things happening right now, right? And could one of them, cause something bigger, right? Certainly the assassination of Franz Ferdinand did, right? But, I don't know. Maybe we'll keep thinking about that one as we go forward and see when we can come back to it. I talked yesterday about primary and secondary sources. Remind me what a primary source is again. I forgot. Is it what? It's an original source, right? And what do you mean by original? Firsthand, people were there, right? Or the source comes from that time period, right? And so and what could be a primary source? Like what kind of media? What's that? A what? A diary, yeah, somebody's dear diary could be that. What else? A letter. Newspapers from the period, yeah. What's that?
Documents.
Yeah, documents. Yeah, official documents are primary sources. What else? Pictures. No, nobody has a real camera like that anymore. Everyone uses their phone. But which, actually, that's interesting to think about, because imagine the amount of primary source material that we are creating now, right? With everyone who has phones, they're taking pictures, they're taking videos, they're doing little TikTok things. Everything's getting posted and recorded. There's a huge amount of primary source material from this period in history, is there not? Massive, right? Massive amounts. What's a secondary source? Like what? Based on the primary source, yeah. So people look at primary sources. Maybe it's pardon me. Maybe it's documents, maybe it's photographs, maybe it's interviews, and they try to tell a story about the past, right? And again, usually they have a point to make, right? Usually they're trying to tell us something about the past or about the present. They have an argument, right? And we'll get to arguments in a little bit, but yeah, they have an argument to make. Right, so we kind of dove in yesterday with the world of World War I, and even though we said that, you know, when we think back to 1900, it was a totally different world, right? And especially if we think in terms of technology. A lot of the things that we are very comfortable with and very used to having did not exist, right? And even the sort of basic version of those things didn't exist, right? Like I have a smartphone here, right? I have a mobile phone here, but not even regular phones existed, right? Not even the ones where you would like pick up and dial. Even those didn't exist, right? Radios weren't even common. People communicated with each other either by talking or by writing letters and sending them by pigeon, yeah, or by mail. But still, that was the only way you communicated with people, right? Imagine let's not go into that. But yeah, like the technology that we sort of take for granted and that we've grown up with, didn't exist. Not even the most basic version existed. And so it was a totally different world. And it was also a world that was sort of more recently created from colonization and industrialization, right? So countries in Western Europe had industrialized. They were building engines that powered factories and produced all kinds of goods, and they needed raw materials to do it. And so they sailed around the world, taking over as much of it as they possibly could in order to gain those resources, right? And sort of stole from many of those countries in the process. Right, so we said that by the time we got around to about 1914 or so, we had two kind of alliances that had formed: Germany and Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, and then Russia, France, and Great Britain. And so why had they allied together, these two groups? What was the purpose of that?
They're afraid of like getting attacked or war by other countries, and then they want to be like united, and then if like some country get attacked, and then like others can help them.
Yeah. If you're worried that you're going to be attacked, then you bring some friends with you, right? And that's exactly what happens here. Everyone who is nervous about being attacked, they try to ally themselves with some bigger friends, right? And so that's exactly what happens here, right? And so the idea here is that no one will attack anyone, because then you'll be dealing with 3 or 4 countries, not just one, right? Yes, so I did want you to read a little bit of the textbook. Now, for those of you who are in class, I don't have the textbook here yet, but I should. Sorry, somebody's no, 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 no. No. One sec here, one sec. All right. Sorry about that. So, I don't have the textbook here yet. I will have it for you here, if not tomorrow, then Friday. But in the meantime, I do have, I was able to post a picture of it on Microsoft Teams. So for those of you who are online and for those of you who are in class, you can go to Microsoft Teams, you can go to the History 12 team, and then you can go to, and then you can go to Files. And if you go under Files at the top, you'll see that there is a folder that says Text Pages, and then in there you'll see a little PDF document that has that section of the textbook for you to read, okay? So, oh good, it did come up. So, can I ask you to read this section of the text and then answer the questions? Just either, type out some answers for yourself. Answers, questions 1 to 6, which is on page 27. And I think I've got that. I think I've got that there. I'm just going to check. Yes, I do. Yes. Okay, I'm gonna add you right now. Okay, so can I ask you to read those pages and answer those questions, and then we'll talk about the answers to them. And so I'm gonna put 12 minutes on the clock here, and hopefully that will be enough. Okay. So, can everyone see everyone can see the text in Microsoft Teams? And Kenan, I'm going to add you right now. Let's see here. Okay, History 12. Okay, you are added. Good? All right. Yeah. What's that? You're not in there? Okay, let me just let me have a look here, Daniel. That would be weird if you weren't, but there you are. Okay, no, you're added. Let me have a look here if that's okay. questions are at the end of that document. So if you go into this, so we'll be on the last page. Good. Okay. 10 seconds here. I will add you. Okay, good? We're not there yet? You see it? Okay. Awesome. Okay. How are we? Are we close? Do we need a couple more minutes? What's happening out there? 2 more minutes? 3 more minutes? 2 or 3? Okay. Okay. Let's talk about this. So, again, this is a bit of a review of what we talked about already, although there's some new information in there. I didn't want to start this class, on day one with textbook reading, so it's a little bit redundant, but that's okay. Let's just talk about some of the questions here quickly. Number one, how does industrialization affect the global power structure? How does industrialization change the global power structure?
The country without like industrialization has like more power than others, and like it makes the balance like it not lose the balance of the country, and then like it makes tension between the of like the industrial country or industrial powers.
Yeah, there was a lot more, there really, you could probably say that before industrialization, it was very difficult to have one country or one state kind of dominate others, right? You needed a big army, right? And you needed to sort of go in and occupy them. But people, the level of technology was much more similar between nations, and it was really hard for any group to sort of dominate another one. But yeah, with industrialization, people's capacity to build things is increased substantially, right? And so these countries like Britain and France and Germany, they're able to mass produce things, right? And again, if you can mass produce weapons, you have a huge advantage over everyone else who can't. And so these countries gain a lot of technological power, but they also have a lot of money, right? And so they become rich, they become powerful, and they are in a place to dominate the entire planet in a way, right? Yeah, that's brand new. How did the Balkan Wars contribute to the outbreak of the First World War? I know we kind of know part of this, but what's going on with the Balkan Wars? Let's see. Yoya, you want to help me out with this one?
They created food processing that was the first World War.
Okay, and what you said they created political what?
Situation.
Say that one more time.
Situation.
Oh yeah, okay. And what was that situation in general? What was that situation in general? Let's help Yoya out. Daniel, can you help him out? What the situation in the Balkans was? I know there was a bunch of things going on. They mentioned Albania and Serbia and access to the ocean, and that's kind of details, but what in general was happening? And we talked about this, I think, yesterday. Yep, we have Austria-Hungary in charge of the Balkan area, right? And are the people in the Balkans, the Serbs and Croatians, and are they happy about that? Yeah, there's a lot of ultranationalism, right? There's a lot of these countries very strongly want they want independence, right? They want their own country. Austria-Hungary is saying, no, you are going to stay under our control, because there's a lot of trade going through there, right? So it creates this very tense situation between Austria-Hungary and and the Balkan countries, right? In some ways, maybe not dissimilar to what's happening in Israel-Palestine right now, but we don't have to get too deep into that. But yeah, maybe it's somewhat similar situation. And so they talk about the beginning of the war with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which we talked about yesterday. But they also mention here the Schlieffen Plan. Oh, pardon me, the Schlieffen Plan. And what on earth is the Schlieffen Plan?
And then he came up with a plan that how to deal with sandwich between the Russia and the France. It's how you deal in the war.
Okay.
So,
You mentioned sandwich, and now I'm getting hungry.
yeah.
Yeah. In all future answers, try not to mention food because everyone will get hungry. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So Germany has a problem, right? They are sandwiched in between Russia on the one side and France on the other, right? Not the sandwich that you want, right? And so Canon, what's their plan? What's the Germans' plan? What are they going to try to do with this Schlieffen Plan? Because they have two enemies to deal with, right? Two enemies. So what are they going to do? Okay, Andre, save us. What's that? Try to fight them? Yeah, okay, but and win, yeah. As is the plan for any war.
And it's Germany trying to get all the troops to fight against France war and take over the France, and then they'll send all the troops back to the border of Russia and try to fight.
Yeah. You don't. If you ever wind up being the commander of the armed forces, which is, I don't know, that might happen. You never know. If you ever wind up being in command of armed forces, you don't want to fight a war on two fronts, right? Because what do you have to do? Well, you have to split your army in half, and then you're only fighting half strength over there and half strength over here, right? You don't want to do that. And so the Germans say, okay, here's the plan. We're going to declare war, we're going to rush in on France, and we're going to knock them out, right, as quickly as we can. And then, once they're out of the picture, then we'll go back and deal with Russia, right? They think that Russia will take a long time to get organized. Russia will take a long time to get to Germany. And in that time, Russia will quickly rush in, knock France out, and then they'll be able to deal with just Russia. Right? Good plan. Let's see. I'm going to leave number 4 because we kind of know why the assassin. Well, yeah, I think we know that. Let's talk about number 5. How does the formation of Germany in 1870 affect the European balance of power? Let me take a step back. How would you explain this idea of balance of power to me? What would you say that is? Okay. So every country has a certain amount of economic and military power, right? And what's this idea of balance of power?
European countries want to have the same amount of almost the same or similar amount of economic and military to can balance the power to not getting engaged, not engaging in war by
Yeah, I guess it depends on your perspective, right? I mean, there's certainly countries that, don't have a lot of power in this period of history, but yeah, in Europe, no country is really strong enough to dominate the others, right? So everyone has a certain amount of power, everything is kind of, you know, relatively stable, at least at first. Um, what would you say if I asked you now about the global balance of power? Who are the kind of big who are the kind of big powers in the world that are kind of balancing each other out? U.S., China, anyone else? Russia, maybe, yeah. Yeah, they still they're kind of a lower power, but they still have some power, yeah. Maybe Germany's pretty big for the European Union, right? They're the kind of the leading member of the European Union. Maybe India, right? India is kind of an emerging power. So yeah, kind of the U.S., China, Russia, India, some of the more powerful European countries, Great Britain, um, Germany, Canada, maybe. We're not that powerful. um, yeah. So how does this reunification or this unification of Germany change the balance of power in Europe? Hmm. Well, yeah, right. So Germany before 1870, Germany is a bunch of little kingdoms, right? So there's all these, like there's all these little areas with these little burgermeisters ruling them all, and they're not really unified, and often they're fighting amongst each other, and they're just not very powerful, separated out. But once they're unified into one country, then they're powerful, right? What does it say? They have 60 million people. Is that what it was? I think so. 60 million people are all together in one country. They're all cooperating now. And so suddenly it's like this major power just appeared out of nowhere, right? And so France and Britain and other European countries now have to deal with this new powerful entity, right? It's called Germany. Um, okay. I'm going to leave number 6 until after the break. Let's take that break. We'll come back and then we'll talk about kind of the conditions and the technology of the war, what it was like, and what kind of new innovations, what technological innovations are kind of being added in. Okay, but let's take a little break first. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. we go. All right, everyone, welcome back. We were answering some questions about the beginning of World War I and how industrialization and the unification of Germany kind of changed the power structure globally and in Europe, and how that eventually led to the beginning of World War I, right? And so question 6 here in the list was briefly describe the first few months of the war and explain the results. What resulted from stalemate and trench warfare? First of all, what's a stalemate? What's a stalemate? Google it if you like, but what is it? Okay, what does it say?
Like stuck in a situation?
Stuck in a situation?
Yeah, like drawing, focusing in track, in not track.
Yeah, so it's a situation where you're sort of competing with someone else, maybe in chess or maybe in war, and nobody can really win, right? You're kind of stuck. Nobody's in the position to kind of win, and everyone, you're just kind of, you can't do anything, right? And so that's what they're talking about here, where you're in a position where you can't score any points, you can't win any battles, you can't really win or move or do anything. You're stuck, right? So what's going on in the first few months of the war, right? So everyone declares war on everyone else, and what happens? Okay, why is that?
Because France has set up so many plans in the borderline. So Germany pushed through France with the border, the France border.
Yeah. So Germany and France, Germany kind of attacks France right away, and what they manage to do is they start digging trenches, right? So they start digging holes in the ground. They start digging holes in the ground where their troops can kind of hide, and we'll get to that in a second. They dig them all in, the Germans dig theirs in, and then that's kind of it. They kind of stay stuck for the rest of the war. And so the line kind of moves back and forth a little bit. Sometimes the French take a little bit of land, sometimes the Germans take a little bit back, but really nothing happens for the rest of the war, except lots of fighting and lots of young men dying, and we'll get to that in a second. What's happening in the east? What's happening on the front with Russia? Yeah, so it took them a little while to kind of get organized, right? And so they do advance. Russia does have a lot of people, right? They do have a lot of population. And so how did the initial battles go? Who's winning? France or not France? Russia or Germany? Yeah. So Germany's kind of succeeding on the Eastern Front, right? They defeat Russia's armies initially, and on the Western Front, nothing's really moving, right? It's a stalemate, right? I want to talk a little bit about trench warfare, and not only trench warfare, but I think some of the technology that we see in this part of the war. Okay, I'm going to jump through that because we talked about that yesterday. All right, here's what I want to talk about. So, how are people, according to the text, how do people feel about the war when it starts? What's their feeling about it? Yeah, they have a positive. Why are they so excited to have a war? Why would anyone be excited to have a war?
They think they're gonna gain more power.
They think they're going to gain more power, right? Exactly. Why else? Why else would someone be excited to go to war?
They will need to steal other countries' territory.
It would lead to other countries what?
They will need to. I think they will need to steal other territories of other countries.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it might put them in a better position in terms of, being able to have power or benefit themselves at the expense of other countries. Do you think that why would young men sign up for the war? And lots of them do. Lots of them volunteer to go to war. Why would young men sign up to go to war?
Because at the time they look at the opportunities to travel to like get places to like get more knowledge about the other things.
Yeah, they could get more knowledge about other places, right? Maybe they hadn't traveled very much, and that was true, right? Travel was expensive and much more difficult than it is now, right? But also there was a certain element of heroism, right? Signing up for the war was like, that just made you a hero, right? If you signed up for the war. And so in lots of these countries, and Canada was no exception, lots of young men immediately went out and signed up to go to war, right? And they did so for a few reasons. And number one was they had this kind of romantic idea of war, right? They'd read stories as children about, the American Revolutionary War and things like that. And of course, that's what warfare looked like in the late 1800s, right? Have you ever seen wars like this fought in movies? Kind of? Yeah, and so this is kind of what you would do, right? Everyone gets dressed up in their fancy coats and hats and, fluffy sleeves and all kinds of things. And they get their guns and they go and march towards each other, right? And they shoot at each other with these very primitive rifles that take about a minute and a half to reload. So you get about one shot, and then it takes you a full minute or so or two to reload this thing. And it was all very kind of heroic and romantic and exciting. And so these young men signed up because, yeah, they're going to go off and be heroes. And they thought the war would be done by December, right? They said, yeah, we're going to go over to Europe, we're going to have a grand adventure, and we're going to come back, and we're all going to be heroes in our uniforms, and the girls will all go, oh boy, they're so cute, right? And the girls will, I know that was a funny voice, I shouldn't have done that. The girls will all swoon over these heroic soldiers when they come back, right? That's what these young men thought. But unfortunately, they were in for a bit of a surprise, right? Because that was not the war that they were entering. But they didn't know, right? They didn't know because this was the first industrial war that was ever fought, right? This is the first war, major war, after the Industrial Revolution. And so this kind of war here that these young men read stories about when they were kids, that doesn't exist anymore, right? The new technology that is coming into this war changes what war is capable of. But nobody's ready for it. The young men aren't ready for it. The army generals aren't ready for it. Nobody, okay? And so, again, these young men had, very kind of a very romantic idea of what war would be. They would go off, they would have an exciting adventure, they would dodge a few bullets, and then they would come home heroes, right? And all the girls would, be fawning all over them. But again, it's not really the reality of it. So, again, what happens at the beginning of this war is actually quite tragic, because we have a real kind of conflict, a real mismatch between the way that war was fought before, right, with all of those armies marching towards each other with their muskets, and the brand new technology that is coming into war. And so as a result, huge numbers of young men die almost immediately because the new technology is being used, but the generals are still trying to fight the wars the way they always have. Okay, and again, you just couldn't do it anymore, right? And I'll show you what we mean in a second. So what I want to do is I just want to watch a quick video here. And so if you are online, I can't stream somebody else's video because it's a copyright infringement, and they'll take my video down. But what I can do is give you the link to it. And so if you're online, if you look in Microsoft Teams, in our history channel, you'll see that I've put 2 links up there. And so if you're online, I just want you to go and watch the first video, and then come back here and we'll talk about what we've seen. And we'll watch the same video here in class on the screen, okay? So online people, I'll see you in just a couple of minutes after the video is done. Again, it's in Microsoft Teams, just in the main channel there, you'll see a link, okay? So, as you can see, a very different, kind of a very different experience than these young men thought they were going to have, right? They thought they were going to have, like the picture I showed you, marching proudly, shooting a little bit, but you can't do that anymore, right? Because what piece of technology has now been invented? Well, the trench is a response to something else that we saw in there. Right? Yeah. You can't just march on your enemy. Are you crazy? They'll just pull out their machine gun and just cut you all down, right? And so you can't fight the war the way that you used to, right? The technology is making you change it. But again, like I mentioned, some of these generals take a little while to figure that out. And so there's lots of young men who are marched towards the enemy line, and the enemy just cuts them all down, right? And so you have to dig trenches so that you keep your head below the ground, right? So nobody shoots it off. But as you can see, it's a pretty dismal way of fighting the war, right? These guys are stuck in a muddy hole, hoping that a shell doesn't land in their trench, or hoping when they look up to see what's going on, no snipers take their head off, right? And it's a pretty rough way to go through the war. And imagine, one of the historians says, the one thing about trench warfare is boredom. You're just sitting there, right? Waiting for whatever, right? And it gives you a lot of time to think about, what's going to happen. And, I assume it was a pretty miserable way to spend even a minute or two, never mind weeks and months, right? If you weren't killed. But again, thousands and thousands of young men are killed in the process, because again, the technology is not a match for the way that people want to fight the war. Okay. Speaking of technology, let's look at a second video. Okay, so again, if you go to Microsoft Teams online, people, you will see a second video there. So watch that, and then when you're done, come back here and we'll talk again. Okay. Right.
I think one really clear way of understanding the shift in World War I in terms of technology is that soldiers rode in on horses and they left in airplanes.
At the beginning of World War I, warfare is almost in the 19th century style. The French sincerely believed that going at the troops with determination, at enemy troops, is the way to go. What they don't understand is the collision of technologies.
General Pershing didn't believe in the trench warfare. He grew up on the plains fighting in Indian warfare where it was an open confrontation. So he trained his troops to fight in the open warfare. The British and French generals thought he was crazy. They criticized him for this.
It's impossible to cross that deadly beaten zone, the deadly zone between the two lines. The most determined line of soldiers cannot oppose a machine gun that fires hundreds of rounds a minute.
World War I wasn't just the first industrial war, it was also the first scientific war. It was the first time that societies had taken all of their resources of science and intelligence and said, how do we do this better? How do we fight better? How do we develop technologies?
A lot of the armaments you see in World War I had been used before: submarines, trench warfare, Gatling guns, machine guns. What happens during World War I is that these become mature and these become even more destructive.
During the war, the governments of all the different warring powers put enormous amounts of time and effort into scientific and technical development, so that the advancements which would have happened anyway happen at a much more rapid pace, and they happen according to the priorities of the warring powers.
Something happened in trench warfare that changed the course of the war and changed the way we understand warfare today, and that is chemical warfare.
The first gas attack was at a place called Vimy Ridge, and it was mostly Canadian soldiers who were being attacked. And the Canadian soldiers who were in the trenches saw this cloud of haze coming towards them. They had no gas masks. They had no equipment to protect them. Chlorine gas causes your lungs to fill with liquid, and so essentially you drown from the inside out. It was really the first war in which all of the technologies and science and industry of the 19th century were put to the sole purpose of killing people.
Yeah, also very dark. But it's true. Hang on a sec here. Yeah, but it's true that Canadians did have a very important role to play. So I might sort of, toot the Canadian horn a little bit and say that, Canada had an important role in those battles on the Western Front, and actually during those first gas attacks, it was Canadians who figured out how to deal with them first. And believe it or not, what they did was they took like a cloth, like a piece of random cloth, and they peed on it. And so if you pee on it and then you breathe through that, that helps to neutralize the gas. And so these guys figured it out, or somebody knew how to do it. And so
I wonder who was the first one who figured it out.
I don't know. I don't know. You probably have to know something about chemistry in order to do that sort of thing. But I'm sure it wasn't just random. But they figured it out, and so the first gas attacks that happened, they happened to Canadians, and Canadians were kind of the ones to figure out that, oh, this is what we have to do to protect ourselves, until they developed gas masks. And you saw gas masks in the video, but those came later, right? The gas came first, unfortunately. So again, we see lots of new technology happening here, right? So we see machine guns, we see chemical warfare showing up, right? The first gas attacks early in the war. After there was a number of gas attacks, but both sides agreed not to use it after because it was too destructive. Airplanes, right? Airplanes are used at first for kind of spying on the enemy. Keep in mind that in 1914, the first plane that actually can fly was invented 3 years earlier. So this plane here that you see is brand new technology. And very quickly, they start putting machine guns on the planes. And then you have these planes kind of, fighting and trying to shoot each other down in the skies, which is terrifying, right? You've got these tiny planes that, are brand new technology, and then there's a machine gun on it, and you're trying to shoot the other guy in the sky while the other guy is trying to shoot you. Also keep in mind that their pilots weren't given parachutes because they worried that the pilots would get scared and just jump out of the plane, and then the plane would be wasted. So they didn't give them parachutes to encourage them to come back and land the plane. Terrifying, right? Terrifying. So yeah, you see lots of technology that is, brand new, massive guns like this that are so big you need to put them on train tracks in order to move them. Later in the war, you see tanks being developed because, again, nobody could cross that area between the trenches, right? If you tried to come out of your trench and charge the enemy, you'll get cut down, right? So they start creating tanks later in the war to try and get around that, and they work. But again, they don't show up right away. Yeah. Again, machine guns here are used. You can see these guys with some gas masks, which, I don't know, that looks like a paper bag with eye holes, so I don't know how comfortable I would feel wearing a gas mask like that, but that's what they were in 1915 or so. Yeah, we see chemical warfare for the first time. Yeah. And so one of the kind of themes of technology here is the idea that there's kind of a mismatch between how people like to do things and the new technology that is now appearing. And often that's the case, right? Is that technology is created and then we have to kind of figure out how to use it. Can you think of any technologies yourself that kind of appeared, right? People figured out how to do something or how to make something, and we're still trying to figure out kind of what to do with it or how to use it. What's that? Yes. So here in World War I, we have new technologies that people are struggling to figure out either how to use or how to kind of guard themselves or protect themselves against, right? So a lot of technological innovation, and then people have to adapt. And so is there anything that you can think of, maybe in sort of more modern history, where a technology has been created and we are still kind of struggling to figure out what to do with it or figuring out how to adapt to it? What do you think?
I think we all adapt.
Probably to some degree, I think. I mean, eventually we adapt to all of our technology, I would think. But what about genetic technology? Are there still questions about how to use that technology that we might have? Yeah, like what? Yeah. So we have the capacity to modify genetic sequences, right? Of plants, of animals, of human beings, right? Should we do that? Let's say with humans. Should we start modifying people's genetic code if we can? What do you think? Is that a good idea? Bad idea?
It could be a bad idea. I think we should not second research.
Say that again, you think?
We should not second research.
Sorry, I can't hear you. It's hard through the mask.
Side effects.
Oh, the side effects? Yeah, certainly there may be if we don't know what we're doing or if we don't do a very good job. But let's say even there's no side effects, we know exactly what we're doing, but should we do it?
There's some like ethical question about modifying DNA because I know a sample of China, like there's a scientist who modified the DNA of like a baby from the fetus, and then like other countries, other scientists are all blaming him like what you do that is like very ethical. It's not like very it's not right to do because like we didn't ask the like how they feel or what they feel about like modifying their DNA.
Sure. So if we're able to modify the DNA, the genetic sequence of an infant, yeah, there's an ethical question, right? That infant did not consent to having its genetic code changed, right? Although for that, in the same way, none of us consented to having the genes we have, right? Nobody asked me what my genetic code should be. It just is what it is. But it's a natural process, right? And genetic modification is not. What do you think we should be allowed to modify? Should it be anything? If I want my kid to have brown eyes, can I just ask a scientist to go in and switch on that gene? My partner really wants our kid to have my eyelashes. So should we be able to do that? Should we be able to go in and just make sure that my genes for the eyelashes show up in our child? It's not the way it's meant to be. What if our child is going to have a genetic disease like muscular dystrophy or multiple sclerosis? Should we be able to go in and fix that? Should we be able to go in and turn that switch off?
Yeah, but it's not the same.
That's a
It just makes it better.
right.
But the eyelashes.
Well, my partner maintains that would be better. She thinks my eyelashes are really long and really nice, and so she thinks that would be better. Certainly not having MS, multiple sclerosis, that would be better too. But who defines what better is? Right? What limits should we put on that technology? Right? How should we use it? Should we use it just to fix people if they have a genetic defect or if they are ill? Or should we try to make people better? Right? What's that? I don't know.
Making people better. Oh, if it's for the army, and just make the soldiers better.
What about this? What if they could switch off my aging genes? So what if they could just, do a little bzzz, I don't know, shoot me with a laser or something, and suddenly I just stay the age I am. I don't age anymore.
Will be overpopulated.
What's that?
Overpopulated.
Well, yeah, but I don't know, that would make me better, wouldn't it? Yeah, I don't want to get old. I'd like to be 114 right now and still look like this. That'd be great. Is that okay?
It is okay for wealthy people.
It's okay for what?
Wealthy people.
That's another issue, right? Is that this technology might be expensive. And so is it right for wealthy people to be able to fix themselves or their children and poor people can't? Is that okay? I don't know. Can you think of other considerations here?
Like this kind of ethical question discussed about for decades, and there has still no answer for that.
Yeah. However, we've been talking about it for a long time. There's still no answer, but the technology continues to advance, right? And the point you made about I'm not aware of that case in China, but even if the US, let's say the US and Canada say, you know what, we think experimenting on humans and playing with their genetics is bad, we think it's unethical, we're not going to do it. Okay, we don't do it, but someone will, somewhere, right? Not everywhere will be regulated. People have lots of money. Countries have lots of money. Somebody will experiment with this stuff. Somebody will figure it out. And so what should we do with this technology if we can start turning people's genes on and off and making them into whatever we want, right? Someone like Adolf Hitler would have loved that technology, right? He had a very clear idea of what was good and what was not good. And had he had the ability, I'm sure he would have started manipulating people's genes and turning things on and off to make Germans what he wanted to make them. But again, how do we deal with that kind of thing? And maybe the last thing I'll say is that maybe the concern isn't manipulating the genes of humans, because let's face it, humans are pretty complicated creatures, right? But what if you're just manipulating the genetic code of viruses, right? We're dealing with a virus now that's very disruptive, and it's naturally occurring, right? It's a natural mutation. But what if the next one isn't? Right? What if somebody manipulates the genetic code of a virus and makes it worse than it already is? And that's much easier, right? Because viruses have very short codes, right? Viruses aren't really organisms. And so they're much easier to kind of manipulate. Manipulating humans is complicated, right? We've got billions of base pairs of genes. That's really difficult to do. But viruses are a lot simpler, right? And so, again, how might we struggle with that technology if somebody was able to, start modifying viruses, right? That's a little scary too. Okay, that is all for today. Sorry if I didn't mean to scare you with the virus thing. What's that?
Maybe someday there will be a zombie apocalypse.
Maybe. Certainly lots of movie directors think that there will be a zombie apocalypse, right? Hopefully not. Okay, that's all for today. Pack it up. Have a nice afternoon. I will see you tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit more about World War I and maybe some other stuff. Okay, that is all. Online people, I'll see you tomorrow as well. Goodbye.